You don't belong here in the United. Is it because I'm black? Because I'm old? Why don't I belong?
Tears streamed down 73-year-old Grace Matthews' face as the flight attendant forced her from her first-class seat, declaring loudly that people like her didn't belong in premium cabins, unaware that the casually dressed man watching from economy was her son, Marcus, and that his quiet words would soon shatter everything. "You just humiliated my mother, and I own this airline." As the video went viral and Meridian Airlines stock plummeted, Victoria Chen realized she hadn't just stripped dignity from an elderly black woman. She'd exposed the poison in a billion-dollar empire to the one person with the power to burn it down, a son who'd hidden his wealth to protect his mother, only to watch her destroyed by the very company he'd built. Welcome back to Life and Stories, my beautiful family and friends. If you're hooked in and you're ready to enjoy this story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments the time where you're watching from. Because tomorrow, I'll be bringing you another story just as powerful and emotional as this one. And trust me, you don't want to miss it. The morning sun caught the silver threads in her carefully pinned hair as she approached Gate 47. At 73, Grace moved with the measured pace of someone who'd learned patience through necessity. Her navy dress pressed perfect despite the early hour. She'd chosen it specifically for today. Modest but dignified, the kind of outfit that whispered respectability without shouting for attention. VIP boarding for Flight 1847 to San Francisco, the gate agent announced. Grace smiled, adjusting her grip on the cane her doctor insisted she use. Her hip protested the long walk through Atlanta's sprawling airport, but she'd made it. She joined the short line of first-class passengers, a businessman scrolling through his phone, a young couple draped in designer labels, an older gentleman in an expensive suit. Victoria Chen stood at the aircraft door, her smile practiced and precise. 10 years as a flight attendant had taught her to size up passengers in seconds. The businessman, platinum frequent flyer, probably. The couple, new money, eager to be impressed. The older gentleman, corporate executive, would want his whiskey neat before takeoff. Then her eyes landed on Grace. The smile flickered, just for a moment. Victoria's gaze swept from the modest dress to the well-worn cane to the deep brown skin lined with years of stories. Her mental categorization was instant and merciless. Wrong gate, confused elderly woman, probably needed help finding economy boarding. "Good morning," Grace said warmly, extending her boarding pass. Victoria's manicured fingers plucked the paper with barely concealed skepticism. Her eyes widened slightly at the seat assignment. 2A. First class. Window seat. The most expensive on the aircraft. "I'm sorry," Victoria said, her voice honey-sweet with false concern. "There might be some confusion. May I see your identification?" Grace's smile faltered slightly. Of course. She balanced carefully, fishing her driver's license from her purse. Behind her, the businessman shifted impatiently. The couple exchanged glances. Victoria studied the license with the intensity of a customs agent, comparing it to the boarding pass 3 times. "Mrs. Matthews," she said slowly as if speaking to a child, "are you sure you're at the right gate? This is for San Francisco." "Yes, dear. My son lives there." Grace's voice remained steady, but her fingers tightened on the cane. "I see." Victoria's tone suggested she didn't see at all. "And you purchased a first-class ticket?" The businessman behind them cleared his throat. Victoria ignored him. "Yes," Grace said simply. "How?" The single word hung in the air like an accusation. Grace blinked, momentarily confused by the question's audacity. I bought it. Online. Yourself." "Victoria, there's a line," another flight attendant murmured. Victoria waved her colleague away, fixated on her interrogation. "It's just that these tickets are quite expensive. Sometimes elderly passengers get confused with the booking systems. Click the wrong buttons. We can certainly help you find your correct seat. This is my correct seat. Grace's dignity held firm, but hurt crept into her eyes. Victoria's smile tightened. Well, let's get you boarded and we can sort this out inside. She handed back the documents with the air of someone humoring a confused elder. Grace moved down the jet bridge, each step now heavier than before. Behind her, Victoria greeted the businessman with genuine warmth. Good morning, Mr. Davidson. So lovely to see you again. To be as always. Inside the aircraft, Grace found her seat and lowered herself gratefully into the leather. She'd saved for months for this ticket, wanting to surprise Marcus, to show him she could still manage on her own, that she wasn't the burden he worried she'd become. Ma'am. Victoria appeared again, that practiced smile sharp as glass. I'm going to need to see that boarding pass one more time. Grace fumbled for it, aware of the other passengers settling around her, their curious glances like small weights. Her hands, steady through years of nursing shifts and raising children alone, trembled slightly as she handed over the paper. Victoria made a show of examining it, then spoke into her radio, loud enough for the cabin to hear. Can we get a supervisor to first class? We have a ticketing issue. What issue? Grace asked, her voice smaller now. Just a precaution. These computer systems. Victoria shrugged, but her eyes remained cold. You understand. Grace understood perfectly. She understood the look, the tone, the assumption that she didn't belong here among the leather seats and complimentary champagne. She'd understood it in department stores where security followed her, in restaurants where she was seated near kitchens, in a lifetime of spaces where her presence was questioned before it was accepted. Marcus Matthews boarded the plane in the middle of the economy crowd, baseball cap pulled low, Stanford hoodie replacing his usual custom suit. He'd learned years ago that traveling incognito revealed truths his executive title obscured. Today's flight on his own airline was another quiet inspection, a chance to see his company through passengers' eyes. He moved through first class toward economy, then stopped. His mother sat in 2A, shoulders curved inward as a flight attendant loomed over her, radiating official displeasure. His blood turned to ice. He'd bought that ticket himself, insisting she take first class despite her protests about waste. She didn't know he owned the airline. He'd kept that secret, not wanting to burden her with the weight of his success, the distance it might create between them. She thought he was still the mid-level executive he'd been 5 years ago. Is there a problem? A man in 2C asked Victoria, his tone suggesting he'd prefer the drama resolved quickly. No problem, sir. Just verifying some information. Victoria turned back to Grace. Mrs. Matthews, when did you purchase this ticket? 3 weeks ago. And the credit card used? Marcus's jaw clenched. No flight attendant should be asking these questions. Ever. My son's, Grace admitted quietly. He insisted on buying it for me. Victoria's expression shifted to triumph, as if she'd caught a criminal. So you didn't purchase it yourself? He gave me the ticket as a gift. I see. And does your son often buy you? Victoria gestured at the first-class cabin. Such expensive gifts? The businessman in 2B had stopped pretending to read his newspaper. The couple across the aisle watched with the fascination of people witnessing a car accident. Marcus pulled out his phone, typing rapidly. But he didn't intervene. Not yet. He needed to see how far this would go, how deep the rot in his company ran. My son is a good man, Grace said with quiet pride. He works hard. I'm sure he does. Victoria's condescension dripped like poison. But these seats are typically for our business travelers, frequent flyers who understand the expectations of premium service. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable. I'm comfortable here. Victoria's smile vanished entirely. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to insist we verify this booking with our ground staff. For security purposes." "Security?" Grace's voice cracked. "I've done nothing wrong. No one's saying you have. But we need to ensure all our passengers are in their rightfully assigned seats. You understand." Marcus watched his mother shrink into herself, watched 73 years of strength and dignity crumble under the weight of public suspicion. His phone buzzed with responses from his executive team, but he ignored them. This required more than corporate intervention. This required a son. If this story resonates with you, remember that dignity costs nothing to give but everything to lose. Keep reading to witness how justice arrives when we least expect it. The supervisor who arrived was everything Victoria Chen had summoned. Young, white, and already wearing the expression of someone prepared to solve a situation. Brad Thompson had been with the airline for 2 years, long enough to develop confidence but not wisdom. He approached with Victoria at his shoulder, her posture radiating vindication. "Mrs. Matthews." Brad's voice carried the false warmth of customer service training. "I'm Brad Thompson, cabin supervisor. I understand there's some confusion about your seat assignment." Grace straightened in her seat, summoning reserves of dignity she'd need for what was coming. "There's no confusion. This is my seat." Of course. Brad crouched beside her seat, a gesture meant to seem friendly but felt patronizing. "Sometimes our booking system has glitches. May I see your documentation?" For the 3rd time, Grace produced her boarding pass and ID. Her hands, which had delivered babies and held dying patients steady through their last breaths, shook with humiliation. Brad studied the documents with theatrical thoroughness. "And you said your son purchased this ticket?" "Yes." "May I ask what your son does for a living?" The question hung in the air like a trap. Around them, first class filled with passengers pretending not to listen while hanging on every word. A woman in 1A had actually turned around to watch. "He's in business," Grace said carefully. Marcus had always been private about his work, and she respected that. "Business?" Brad exchanged a look with Victoria. "That's quite broad. What kind of business? Does it matter?" The businessman in 2B, Mr. Davidson, finally spoke up. "She has a valid ticket." Victoria's smile turned icy. "Sir, we appreciate your patience. This is a security matter." "Security?" Davidson frowned. "She's a 70-year-old woman with a cane." "Age doesn't preclude security concerns," Brad said smoothly. "Mrs. Matthews, I'm going to need your son's contact information to verify this purchase." Grace's composure finally cracked. "You want to call my son? To prove I belong here. It's standard procedure for unusual bookings." "Unusual?" Grace's voice rose slightly. "What's unusual about it?" The silence that followed was deafening. Everyone knew what was unusual. An elderly black woman in first class, wearing a modest dress instead of designer clothes, carrying a sensible purse instead of luxury leather. In row 15, Marcus gripped his armrest hard enough to leave marks. Every instinct screamed to intervene, but he forced himself to wait. He needed to see the full extent of this cancer in his company. His legal team would need every detail. "Mrs. Matthews," Victoria stepped forward, her patience clearly exhausted. "These seats cost over $3,000. You must understand why we need to verify." "I understand perfectly." Grace's voice carried the weight of every slight, every suspicious look, every time she'd been made to feel less than. "You think I stole this ticket. You think I don't belong here." "No one's saying that," Brad lied smoothly. "But we have a responsibility to all our passengers. To make sure the right kind of people sit in first class?" The words landed like a slap. Several passengers shifted uncomfortably. The woman in 1A turned back around, suddenly fascinated by the safety card. Victoria's mask finally slipped completely. "Ma'am, if you can't provide adequate verification for this booking, I'm going to have to ask you to move to your correct seat." "This is my correct seat." "Then you won't mind if we call your son to confirm?" It was a chess move designed to force surrender. Either admit the ticket was fraudulent or reveal that her businessman son probably couldn't afford such luxury. Victoria's satisfaction was evident. She'd cornered what she saw as a pretender, someone reaching above their station. Grace fumbled for her phone with trembling fingers. "His number is—" "That won't be necessary." Mr. Davidson stood up, his patience exhausted. "This is harassment. She has a valid ticket. Seat her and move on." Brad turned his practiced smile on the businessman. "Sir, I appreciate your concern, but—" "I'm a platinum member," Davidson interrupted. 20 years of loyalty to this airline. If this is how you treat passengers, maybe it's time I reconsidered." Victoria paled slightly. Platinum members were Holy Grail customers, each worth hundreds of thousands in annual revenue. But her pride had already committed her to this course. "Mr. Davidson, this is about ensuring the safety and comfort of all our passengers." "Her comfort doesn't seem to be a priority." A flight attendant appeared at Brad's shoulder, whispering urgently. He frowned, then nodded. "Mrs. Matthews, I've just been informed we have a situation. We're overbooked in first class." It was a lie so transparent that even passengers who'd been avoiding eye contact looked up in surprise. The flight wasn't full. Several first-class seats remained empty. "Overbooked," Grace repeated flatly. "Yes. Since your ticket was a recent purchase, and we have several of our frequent flyers waiting for upgrades, I'm afraid we'll need to reseat you." "You're bumping her." Davidson's voice rose. "For phantom passengers?" "Sir, please don't interfere. Where's your manager? The real manager?" Brad stiffened. "I am the ranking supervisor on this flight." In economy, Marcus typed furiously on his phone. His chief operations officer was already en route to the airport. The head of HR was pulling Victoria Chen's employment records. The legal team was documenting every violation of company policy. But none of that would help his mother in this moment. "Mrs. Matthews," Victoria said, her voice now sharp with authority, "I need you to gather your belongings and come with me." "No." The simple word carried the weight of Rosa Parks, of every person who'd ever decided that this indignity would be the last. Victoria's face flushed. "Ma'am, if you refuse to comply, I'll have to call security to remove you from the aircraft." "You're going to call security on an elderly woman for sitting in the seat she paid for?" Davidson pulled out his phone. "This should be interesting." "Sir, recording is not permitted." Actually, a younger passenger across the aisle spoke up, his phone already out. "It is. I checked your policy. Passengers can record if they feel they're witnessing discrimination." The word hung in the air like a grenade with its pin pulled. Victoria and Brad exchanged panicked looks. This was spiraling beyond their control. "No one's discriminating," Brad said quickly. "This is simply about proper seat assignments." "Then check your system again," Davidson demanded. "Pull up her booking. Prove it's invalid." Brad hesitated, and in that hesitation, his guilt was clear. He knew the booking was valid. They all knew. Grace sat perfectly still, a woman who'd faced down racist doctors who questioned her nursing degree, who'd raised 3 children alone after their father died, who'd built a life of quiet dignity in a world that constantly demanded she prove her worth. But 73 years of strength had limits, and tears finally escaped down her cheeks. "Please," she whispered, I just want to see my son." In that moment, Marcus Matthews made his decision. He stood up in economy, his movement drawing the attention of nearby passengers. But before he could move toward first class, Victoria made the choice that would end her career. "Security to first class," she spoke into her radio. "We have a disruptive passenger refusing to comply with crew instructions." The cabin erupted. Davidson stood fully. Other passengers voiced protests. Phones appeared everywhere. But Victoria, drunk on her own authority, pointed at Grace. "Ma'am, for the last time, you need to move. Now." Grace looked up at her tormentor, tears streaming but spine straight. "My name," she said with quiet force, "is Mrs. Matthews. I am a retired nurse. I served this country's sick for 45 years. I raised 3 children, buried a husband, and built a life of dignity. I have never stolen anything. I have never lied. And I will not move from this seat that my son bought for me because you cannot believe a black woman belongs in first class." The truth, spoken aloud, silenced the cabin. Even Victoria stepped back, the ugliness of her assumptions laid bare. It was then that Marcus appeared at the curtain dividing the cabins, his presence commanding attention despite the casual clothes. He looked at his mother's tears, at Victoria's defiant stance, at Brad's nervous fidgeting. His voice, when he spoke, was deadly quiet. "No. She won't be moving." Victoria Chen whirled toward the new voice, ready to unleash her authority on another interfering passenger. "Sir, return to your seat immediately. This doesn't concern." "It concerns me very much." Marcus stepped fully into first class, his presence somehow filling the space despite his casual attire. "That's my mother." Victoria's irritation flared into open hostility. Here was another problem. Probably the son who couldn't really afford the ticket he'd bought, now trying to defend his poor decision. She sized him up. Stanford hoodie, jeans, baseball cap. Not the businessman his mother had claimed. Probably tech support or retail management, spending beyond his means to impress. "Then you can help her gather her things," Victoria said coldly. "Your mother is being relocated." "No," Marcus said simply. "She's not." Brad stepped forward, trying to regain control. "Sir, I'm going to need you to comply with crew instructions. Your mother's ticket is under review." "Her ticket is valid. We both know it." "How would you know what we know?" Victoria's voice dripped condescension. "Are you an airline employee?" Marcus's slight smile held no warmth. "Something like that." "Security is on the way," Brad warned. "Don't make this worse." "Worse." Marcus's voice remained controlled, but something in it made nearby passengers lean away. "You've humiliated a 73-year-old woman for the crime of sitting in a seat she paid for. You've made her cry in front of strangers. How exactly could I make this worse?" Grace reached out, touching her son's arm. "Marcus, please. Let's just go." The defeat in her voice broke something in him. His mother, who'd worked double shifts to pay for his education, who'd faced down gang members trying to recruit him, who'd never backed down from a righteous fight, was ready to surrender. They'd broken her spirit in less than 20 minutes. "Mama, look at me." He knelt beside her seat, his back to Victoria and Brad. "You taught me to stand up to bullies. Remember. This is different." "No. It's exactly the same." He squeezed her hand, then stood and turned back to the crew. "She's not moving." Victoria's face flushed with rage. This was insubordination of the highest order. In her domain, her word was law. "Sir, I'm giving you one last chance." "Or what?" Marcus pulled out his phone. "You'll call security on me too. A black man defending his elderly mother? I'm sure that will look wonderful on social media." Are you threatening us? Brad stepped closer, puffing up with false bravado. I'm promising you consequences for your actions. There's a difference. 2 security officers appeared at the cabin door, airport police, hands resting on their utility belts. The sight of them sent a ripple of tension through first class. This had escalated beyond anyone's expectations. Officers, Victoria said quickly, her voice triumphant. We have 2 passengers refusing to comply with crew instructions. The lead officer, a middle-aged man with tired eyes, surveyed the scene. An elderly black woman crying in first class. Her son standing protectively nearby. Flight crew radiating self-righteous authority. Passengers with phones out, recording everything. What's the issue? He asked carefully. Ticketing dispute, Brad said quickly. This passenger can't verify her first-class booking. We've asked her to relocate while we sort it out, but she's refusing. She has a valid ticket, Mr. Davidson interjected. They've been harassing her for 20 minutes. The officer looked at Grace. Ma'am, may I see your boarding pass? With shaking hands, Grace produced the now crumpled paper. The officer examined it, scanned the barcode with a mobile device and frowned. This appears to be valid. There are irregularities, Victoria insisted. The purchase pattern, The what? The officer's tone sharpened. Ma'am, do you have evidence of fraud? Victoria faltered. Well, no, but... Then what's the problem? The naked question exposed the truth. There was no problem except the one Victoria had created, born from prejudice and sustained by pride. But she'd gone too far to back down now. Officer, as lead flight attendant, I have the authority to reseat passengers for the safety and comfort of... Safety. Marcus interrupted. What safety issue does my mother pose? Sir, please let us handle this, the second officer said. Handle what? A flight attendant harassing an elderly woman. Marcus, Grace whispered. Please. Let's just go. It's not worth it. Those words, it's not worth it, echoed with generations of swallowed pride, of battles not fought because the cost was too high. How many times had she said them? When the hospital promoted less qualified white nurses over her. When store clerks followed her through departments. When teachers assumed her children couldn't excel. You're worth it, Mama, Marcus said firmly. You've always been worth it. Victoria seized on Grace's moment of weakness. See, even she agrees this is unnecessary drama. Mrs. Matthews, please come with us. We'll find you a lovely seat in economy. Economy. Grace's voice cracked. But I paid for. The airline will refund the difference, of course, Brad added smoothly. This is just a temporary adjustment. It was the final humiliation. Not just to be removed, but to be compensated for it, as if money could buy back dignity. Several first-class passengers looked away, uncomfortable but unwilling to risk involvement beyond what they'd already done. Officers, Victoria said formally, we need this passenger relocated immediately. The flight cannot depart with this disruption. The lead officer sighed. He'd seen this before. Crew using their authority to enforce unwritten rules about who belonged where. But his job was to maintain peace, not justice. Ma'am, he addressed Grace gently. Would you be willing to take a different seat just for this flight? Sometimes it's easier. Easier for who? Marcus demanded. Sir, I'm trying to resolve this peacefully. Peacefully. Marcus's control finally cracked. You're asking my mother to accept discrimination peacefully. To go quietly to the back of the plane because someone decided she doesn't look like she belongs in first class. No one said that, Brad protested. Everyone knows that's exactly what this is about. The words exploded from Marcus. Look at her. Look at what you've done. She saved lives for 45 years. She raised children alone. She's never asked for anything but basic respect, and you can't even give her that." His voice carried into economy, where passengers craned to see the confrontation. Flight attendants throughout the plane exchanged nervous glances. This was becoming a scene that would make news cycles. "Sir, calm down," the second officer warned. "I am calm. I'm also not moving. Neither is she." Victoria played her final card. "Officers, this man is creating a hostile environment. I don't feel safe with him on this aircraft." It was a calculated escalation. A black man expressing anger, even righteous anger, could be reframed as a threat. She knew it. Marcus knew it. Everyone watching knew it. The lead officer's hand moved instinctively toward his radio. "Sir, I'm going to need you to step off the aircraft." "For defending my mother?" "For refusing to comply with crew instructions and creating a disturbance." Marcus looked at his mother, seeing the horror in her eyes. This was her nightmare. Her son arrested for standing up for her. He could see her calculating whether her dignity was worth his freedom. "Baby, please." Grace stood on unsteady legs. "I'll move." "Don't do this." "Mama." "I'll move." The words came out as a sob. "Just, please." Everyone stop. Victoria's triumph was ugly to witness. She'd won by threatening the thing Grace valued most, her son's safety. It was manipulation at its cruelest, using a mother's love as a weapon against her. "Excellent choice, Mrs. Matthews," Victoria said briskly. "If you'll gather your things." Grace moved like a broken doll, collecting her purse, her jacket, the book she'd brought to read. Her cane shook as she leaned on it. Marcus moved to help her, but the officers stepped between them. "Sir, we need you to return to your seat first." "I'm not leaving her." It wasn't a request. The entire first-class cabin watched in shameful silence as Grace Matthews, 73 years old, was escorted from her purchased seat like a criminal. Her shoulders shook with silent sobs. Behind her, Victoria supervised with the efficiency of someone who'd done this before, who'd decided who belonged and who didn't, who deserved dignity and who could be stripped of it. "This way, Mrs. Matthews," Brad said with false kindness, leading her toward economy. "We'll find you something comfortable." They passed through business class, where passengers averted their eyes. They entered economy, where curious faces turned to stare. Each step was a gauntlet of humiliation. Marcus followed at a distance, the officers ensuring separation from his mother. His phone buzzed constantly, his executive team responding to his earlier messages, but he ignored it. All that mattered was the slump of his mother's shoulders, the way she seemed to shrink with each row they passed. They stopped at row 31, near the bathrooms. A middle seat, cramped and uncomfortable. The final insult. "Here we go," Brad announced cheerfully. 31B. Grace looked at the seat, then at her son, then at the long walk back to where her dignity had been stripped away. "My hip," she whispered. "The doctor said I needed to keep it elevated. That's why Marcus bought." "I'm sure you'll be fine for a short flight," Victoria interrupted. "It's only 5 hours." 5 hours. In a cramped middle seat. With a bad hip. After being humiliated in front of dozens of strangers. Grace lowered herself into the seat, wincing as her hip protested. The passengers on either side shifted uncomfortably, suddenly part of this drama they hadn't asked for. "Mama." Marcus knelt in the aisle beside her, officers hovering close. "This isn't over." "It is," she said quietly. "It always is." "No. Not this time." He pulled out his phone, showing her the screen. "Not this time." Grace's eyes widened at what she saw, but Marcus had already stood, turning to face Victoria and Brad with a smile that made them both step back. "Congratulations," he said quietly. "You've just given me everything I needed." Before either could respond, he walked back toward his economy seat, typing rapidly on his phone. The officers followed, ensuring he didn't return to first class. Victoria and Brad exchanged uncertain looks. Something in his tone, in his confidence, sent warning signals they couldn't quite interpret. "Well," Victoria said, shaking off her unease. "That's handled. Let's prepare for departure." But as she returned to first class, she noticed something had changed. The passengers who'd remained silent now watched her with open disgust. Mr. Davidson was on his phone, speaking rapidly. The woman in 1A had switched to a different airline's app, booking a return flight. And in 31B, Grace Matthews sat squeezed between strangers, her dignity in tatters but her son's final words echoing in her mind. "Not this time." The plane pushed back from the gate, but the real turbulence was just beginning. The plane climbed through 10,000 feet, and the cabin lights dimmed to cruising altitude. In first class, Victoria Chen moved through her service routine with practiced efficiency, but something was off. The usual appreciative smiles were replaced with cold stares. Mr. Davidson refused his pre-ordered meal. The woman in 1A declined champagne with a curt, "No thank you." Even the typically chatty business travelers remained silent, buried in their devices. In 31B, Grace shifted for the dozenth time, trying to find a position that didn't send shooting pain through her hip. The passenger to her left, a young woman with kind eyes, had offered to switch seats, but the aisle seat wasn't much better. Her cane, too long for the cramped space, kept sliding into the walkway. "Ma'am, you need to keep that out of the aisle," a passing flight attendant said tersely. Grace pulled it back, blinking away fresh tears. She'd cried more in the last hour than in the past decade. The humiliation sat like lead in her chest, making it hard to breathe. 3 rows back, Marcus Matthews worked with cold precision. His phone screen glowed with message after message. Asterisk legal team standing by. Janet asterisk. Asterisk all department heads notified. Emergency meeting scheduled upon landing. Richard asterisk. Asterisk PR crisis team activated. Monitoring social media. This is already viral. Samantha asterisk. Asterisk board members requesting immediate briefing. David asterisk. He switched to his email, fingers flying across the screen. 5 years ago, he'd been exactly what Victoria assumed, a mid-level manager struggling to make ends meet. But a revolutionary logistics software he'd developed had caught the attention of Meridian Airline's previous owner. Within 18 months, he'd gone from selling his program to buying the entire airline with a consortium of investors who believed in his vision of dignity in air travel. He'd kept it from his mother, not out of shame but out of love. She'd worried about him his whole life, working too hard, reaching too high, risking too much. The airline purchase had over-leveraged him to the point where one bad quarter could ruin everything. Why burden her with that stress? Let her think he was comfortable, not wealthy. Let her keep treating him like her baby boy who needed reminding to eat vegetables and get enough sleep. But now, watching her pain 3 rows ahead, he realized his protection had left her vulnerable. His phone buzzed. The chief operations officer. Asterisk, "Sir, I'm at the airport." The crew manifests show Victoria Chen as lead FA. 14 complaints in her file, all discrimination-related. All buried by middle management. Brad Thompson has 6 similar complaints. How do you want to proceed? Asterisk. Marcus typed back. Asterisk, document everything. Pull all buried complaints system-wide. I want to know how deep this goes. Asterisk. In first class, Victoria felt her phone vibrate in her pocket. Strictly against regulations during service. She ignored it, but it buzzed again. And again. During a moment in the galley, she quickly checked it. 17 missed calls. 43 text messages. Her husband. Asterisk Victoria, what's happening? Your supervisor called. He said don't do anything else until you land. Asterisk. Her blood chilled. How would her supervisor even know about a routine reseating? Brad appeared beside her, his face pale. My manager just texted me. He said there's an emergency meeting when we land. About this flight. That's ridiculous, Victoria said. But uncertainty crept into her voice. We followed protocol. Did we? Brad's confidence was evaporating. She had a valid ticket. We had no actual reason. She didn't belong there. The words slipped out before Victoria could stop them. Brad stared at her. What? I mean, the situation was suspicious. An elderly woman in a modest dress with a first-class ticket? Come on. That's not. We can't. Brad's phone buzzed. He looked at it and went even paler. Oh God. Someone posted a video. It has 2 million views already. Victoria snatched his phone. The video, titled Racist Flight Attendant Humiliates Elderly Black Woman, showed her standing over Grace, voice dripping with condescension. The comments were brutal. Asterisk, fire her immediately. Asterisk. Asterisk, at Billionaire, is this your policy? Asterisk. Asterisk, that poor woman. My heart breaks for her. Asterisk. Boycott Meridian Airlines. Delete it, Victoria said desperately. It's not mine to delete. It's everywhere. Twitter, TikTok, Instagram. Brad's phone rang. He answered with shaking hands. Hello? Yes, sir. Yes, I understand. Yes, sir. He hung up looking like he might vomit. That was the VP of Operations. He said don't speak to any passengers. Don't make any decisions. Just land the plane. In economy, Marcus felt his phone buzz with a call from his CFO. He answered quietly. Marcus, the stock price is already dropping in after-hours trading. Social media is exploding. The video. I know. You know. How could you wait? You're on that flight. I am. A pause. Oh my God. Your mother. The woman in the video is your mother. She is. Marcus, I'm so sorry. Do you want me to release a statement? If people knew you owned. Not yet. I need to see how the crew handles this. Whether anyone shows integrity. The PR team says we need to act fast. This could spiral. It's already spiraled. The question now is whether we have a company worth saving. Marcus ended the call and looked up to see a flight attendant approaching his mother. Not Victoria or Brad, a younger woman with concern in her eyes. Mrs. Matthews, she said gently. I'm Sarah. I saw what happened. I'm so sorry. Can I get you anything? A pillow for your hip? A different seat? Grace looked up, surprised by the kindness. Aren't you risking your job talking to me? Sarah glanced toward first class, then back. Maybe. But what they did was wrong. Everyone knows it. She lowered her voice. I've reported Victoria before. For similar things. Nothing ever happens. Why not? She has seniority. She knows who to charm. And Sarah hesitated. And usually the passengers just take it. They don't want trouble. Grace nodded slowly. I didn't want trouble either. I know. I'm sorry. Sarah pulled a blanket from the overhead bin. Here. This might help with your hip. And she slipped Grace a first-class amenity kit. You paid for this. You should have it. It was a small gesture, but Grace's eyes filled with fresh tears. Grateful ones this time. Thank you, dear. Sarah. Brad's sharp voice cut through the moment. What are you doing? Sarah straightened. Providing customer service. Return to your assigned section. Now. Sarah squeezed Grace's hand before leaving. It was wrong, she whispered. Everyone knows it was wrong. Brad glared at Grace as if she'd orchestrated this small rebellion, then stalked back toward first class. But the damage to his authority was spreading. Other flight attendants began quietly defying the invisible barrier, bringing Grace water, checking on her comfort, treating her with the dignity she'd been denied. Marcus watched it all, taking notes. Sarah Chen would be promoted by week's end. The others showing courage would be recognized. But it was too little, too late for his mother's humiliation. His phone screen lit up with an incoming call from the chairman of the board. Marcus declined it. Then the vice chairman, the head of the pilots' union, the president of the Flight Attendants Association. Everyone scrambling to distance themselves from the viral disaster. But Marcus wasn't interested in their excuses. He was watching Victoria, who had emerged from first class looking haggard. The weight of consequences was beginning to settle on her shoulders. She approached the galley where several flight attendants huddled around a phone. What are you looking at? She demanded. They scattered, but not before Marcus caught sight of one screen, a news article already picking up the story. Meridian Airlines under fire for discrimination. Victoria's phone rang. She answered with forced professionalism. Hello. Yes, this is. What? That's impossible. Check again. Her face went white. The owner. What do you mean the owner is? No. No, that can't be right. She hung up, hands trembling. Brad appeared beside her. What is it? That was corporate. They said. She couldn't finish the sentence. It was too impossible, too catastrophic to voice. Said what? They said the owner is on this flight. That he's. Her eyes swept economy class with new terror. That he's involved in the situation. Brad's knees nearly buckled. The owner. Marcus Matthews owns Meridian Airlines. The name hit Victoria like a physical blow. Matthews. The elderly woman's son. The man in the Stanford hoodie she'd dismissed as nobody important. The man who'd promised consequences. We need to fix this, Brad said desperately. We need to apologize, make it right. It's too late. Victoria's voice was hollow. Don't you understand? We humiliated his mother. In front of everyone. We made her cry. We. She trailed off, the full weight of their actions crashing down. They hadn't just mistreated a passenger. They'd exposed the rot in the company's culture to the one person with the power to burn it all down. Maybe if we upgrade her back to first class. Brad started. Stop. Marcus's voice came from behind them. They spun to find him standing in the galley, no longer hiding his authority. Even in casual clothes, power radiated from him like heat. You think this is about a seat? Mr. Matthews, Victoria stammered. I didn't know. Exactly. You didn't know. So you showed me exactly who you are. Who this company has become. His voice remained calm, which was somehow worse than shouting. Tell me, Ms. Chen, how many other passengers have you decided don't belong in first class? I don't. 14. That's how many complaints are in your file. 14 people who looked like my mother, who dressed like her, who you decided weren't worthy of the seats they paid for. Victoria's legs shook. Those complaints were investigated. Buried. The word you're looking for is buried. Marcus turned to Brad. And you have 6. 6 people whose dignity you stripped away because you could. Sir, please, Brad begged. We can make this right. Can you? Marcus pulled out his phone, showing them the screen. 3 million views now. Meridian Airlines trending worldwide. Stock price down 12%. 23 news outlets requesting statements. Tell me, Mr. Thompson, how do we make that right? Neither had an answer. There wasn't one. I built this airline on a simple principle, Marcus continued. Every passenger, regardless of who they are or what they look like or what they wear, deserves dignity, respect, basic human kindness. You took that from my mother. But worse, you've been taking it from others for years. We'll resign, Victoria said quickly. Effective immediately. Oh, you'll do more than resign. Marcus's smile was sharp as winter. You'll face civil lawsuits, criminal charges for discrimination, personal liability for the damage to our stock price. But first, he stepped aside. You're going to face her. They turned to see Grace standing behind them, supported by Sarah and 2 other flight attendants who'd shown her kindness. She looked small but unbroken, dignity restored not by her son's power but by her own inherent worth. Mrs. Matthews, Victoria began, tears streaming down her face. I'm so. Don't. Grace's voice was steady. Your apology means nothing. It's only coming because you found out who my son is. If he was really the nobody you thought he was, would you be sorry? Victoria's silence was answer enough. That's what I thought. Grace straightened, speaking not just to Victoria but to everyone listening. I've faced women like you my whole life. You see my skin, my age, my clothes, and you think you know my worth. You think you get to decide where I belong. She stepped closer, and Victoria actually backed away. But you're wrong. I belonged in that seat not because my son owns this airline, but because I'm a human being who paid for a ticket. My worth doesn't come from his success. It comes from my own life, my own dignity, my own right to exist in any space I choose to occupy. The cabin had gone completely silent. Even the engine noise seemed to fade as Grace Matthews spoke her truth. You tried to make me small today. You succeeded for a moment. But here's what you didn't know. I raised the man who signs your paychecks. I taught him that dignity isn't negotiable. That respect isn't conditional. That every person deserves to be seen as fully human. She turned to her son. I'm proud of you, baby. Not for owning planes, but for remembering what I taught you. Marcus hugged his mother, feeling her strength flow into him. I learned from the best. When they separated, he faced the crew again. We'll be landing in 2 hours. Use that time to think about every passenger you've ever made feel less than human. Because when we touch down, everything changes. He guided his mother back toward economy, but she stopped. No. I paid for first class. I'll sit in first class. Mama, you don't have to. Yes, I do. She looked back at Victoria. Because if I don't, she wins. They all win. Every person who ever told me I didn't belong somewhere wins. Marcus nodded, understanding. This wasn't about comfort anymore. It was about principle. They walked to first class together, heads high. The passengers who'd remained silent during her humiliation now stood, one by one. Not commanded, not prompted, but moved by witnessing courage in its purest form. Mr. Davidson started the applause. Others joined. By the time Grace reached 2A, her seat, rightfully hers, the entire first-class cabin was on their feet. She settled into the leather seat, her hip grateful for the space, her heart full of something more than vindication. She'd been seen. Not as a poor old woman, not as the owner's mother, but as herself. Marcus took the empty seat beside her, the one that had mysteriously become available. "You okay, Mama?" "I am now." She patted his hand. "But you have work to do. This isn't just about one flight crew." He nodded. "I know. This is systemic. Company-wide changes, starting tomorrow." "Starting now," she corrected. "That sweet girl Sarah, she stood up when it mattered. That means something." "Already noted. She'll be part of the solution." They sat in comfortable silence as the plane continued west. Around them, the atmosphere had shifted. Victoria and Brad, banished to jump seats, faced their phones with mounting horror as the consequences multiplied. Other crew members went about their duties with new awareness, treating every passenger with exaggerated care. But for Grace Matthews, none of that mattered anymore. She'd found her worth not in her son's revelation but in her own refusal to be diminished. She'd stood up, spoken out, and reclaimed her dignity. And 30,000 feet below, Meridian Airlines' entire corporate structure braced for the reckoning that would come with landing. The captain's voice crackled through the intercom as San Francisco appeared through scattered clouds below. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're beginning our descent. We should be on the ground in approximately 20 minutes. In first class, Grace Matthews gazed out the window at the city where her son had built his empire. She'd been looking forward to this visit for months, not knowing Marcus owned the airline she flew on, just excited to see her baby boy and the life he'd built. Now everything felt different. "Mama," Marcus said softly, "there's going to be a lot of people waiting when we land. Media, corporate executives, lawyers. You don't have to deal with any of it." Grace turned from the window. "Yes, I do. Mama." Marcus Anthony Matthews. Her use of his full name made him sit straighter, a boy again despite his billions. "You think this is just about me? How many other mothers, grandmothers, daughters have sat where I sat? How many have been made to feel worthless by people like her?" She glanced toward the galley where Victoria and Brad waited in misery. "If I hide now, nothing changes." Marcus nodded slowly. His mother had always been the wisest person he knew. "Then we face it together." "No." Grace's voice was firm. "You have a company to fix. I have a story to tell." As the plane descended, phones throughout the cabin began pinging with accumulated messages. The video had exploded beyond anyone's imagination. #DignityForAll was trending globally. Meridian's stock had dropped 18%. Competitors were already running ads promoting their inclusive policies. In the galley, Victoria Chen stared at her phone with hollow eyes. Her professional social media accounts were flooded with death threats, calls for her arrest, dissections of her every expression in the video. Her husband had texted that reporters were camped outside their home. Her mother in Ohio had called crying, asking how her daughter could be so cruel. Brad Thompson wasn't faring better. His fiancée had sent a single message: "I can't marry someone who treats people like that. I'm sorry." Sarah, the flight attendant who'd shown Grace kindness, approached Marcus discreetly. "Mr. Matthews? I wanted to apologize for not intervening sooner. I should have." "You showed courage when it mattered," Marcus interrupted. "That's more than most did. Can I ask you something?" "Of course. How many times have you seen this happen?" Sarah's shoulders sagged. "Too many. It's like an unwritten rule. Certain passengers get scrutinized more, questioned more. We're told it's about maintaining standards, but everyone knows what it really means." "Who tells you this?" "Middle management. Training supervisors. Never in writing, never officially. Just understood." She glanced around nervously. "I've been written up twice for being too accommodating to economy passengers. Marcus made another note. The rot went deeper than individual actors. It was institutional, cultural. Would you be willing to help me change that? Sarah's eyes widened. Me? I'm just a flight attendant. My mother was just a nurse. She saved more lives than most doctors. Marcus smiled. Never underestimate someone who shows kindness when it costs them something. The plane touched down smoothly, but the real turbulence was waiting at the gate. Through the windows, they could see the crowd. News vans, photographers, a phalanx of suits that had to be Meridian executives. Ladies and gentlemen, the captain announced, we have a situation at the gate. Please remain seated until we receive further instructions. Marcus stood. I'll handle this. He walked to the front of the plane, past Victoria and Brad who couldn't meet his eyes, and spoke quietly to the captain through the cockpit door. Then he turned to address the cabin. Folks, I owe you an explanation and an apology. My name is Marcus Matthews, and I own Meridian Airlines. What you witnessed today was a catastrophic failure of our values. My mother was humiliated by crew members who forgot that dignity isn't conditional on wealth or race or appearance. The cabin was silent, all eyes on him. I could have intervened sooner, revealed who I was, thrown my weight around, but I needed to see the truth of what we've become. And the truth is ugly. He looked directly at passengers who'd remained silent. It's not just about those who commit acts of prejudice. It's about those who witness it and say nothing, do nothing, look away because it's not their problem. Mr. Davidson shifted uncomfortably. Others found sudden interest in their phones. But I also saw courage. Sarah here, who risked her job to show my mother kindness. The passengers who spoke up, who recorded, who said, this is wrong. You represent what Meridian Airlines should be. He paused, gathering himself for what came next. When those doors open, there will be chaos. Media wanting statements. Lawyers wanting to limit liability. Executives wanting to control the narrative. But before all that, I need to say something to my mother. He walked back to Grace, kneeling beside her seat so the entire cabin could see. Mama, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I hid my success from you. I thought I was protecting you, but I left you vulnerable. I'm sorry you had to endure this. But mostly, I'm sorry that this happens every day to people who don't have sons who own airlines, who suffer in silence because they have no recourse. Grace cupped his face in her weathered hands. Baby, you listen to me. You stop apologizing for other people's hatred. You want to honor me? Make sure this never happens again. Not to anyone. I will. I promise. And Marcus. She smiled, the expression transforming her face. I'm proud of you. Not for the planes or the money. For remembering that righteousness is more important than revenue. The doors opened. Airport security entered first, followed by Meridian executives led by the Chief Operations Officer, Richard Steinberg, a man who looked like he'd aged a decade in the last 3 hours. Mr. Matthews, Richard began, we've prepared a statement. Throw it out. Marcus stood. We're not spinning this. We're owning it. Sir, the legal ramifications will be whatever they are. Mrs. Chen, Mr. Thompson, please come here. Victoria and Brad approached like condemned prisoners. Victoria's makeup was ruined by tears, her perfect composure shattered. Brad looked like he might faint. These 2 employees discriminated against my mother based on her race and appearance. They will be terminated immediately, banned from any position in the aviation industry, and we will cooperate fully with any civil rights investigations. Marcus's voice carried through the cabin. But their symptoms, not the disease. He turned to Richard. How many discrimination complaints have been buried in the last 5 years? Richard paled. I'd have to check. 47. I already checked. 47 complaints swept under the rug. 47 people treated as less than human while we looked the other way. Marcus's voice rose. That ends today. Mr. Matthews, Victoria suddenly spoke, her voice broken. Please. I have children. A mortgage. I'll lose everything. Grace stood slowly, approaching the woman who'd tormented her. The cabin held its breath. You have children? Grace asked quietly. 2 daughters. 8 and 10. And what will you tell them? When they see the video of you stripping dignity from someone who looks like their teacher, their doctor, their friend's grandmother, what lesson will they learn? Victoria sobbed harder. I don't know. I don't know how I became this person. I'll tell you how, Grace said, not unkindly but firmly. You forgot that every person you meet is someone's child, someone's mother, someone's beloved. You forgot that we all bleed red, cry salt tears, and deserve basic respect. She turned to the watching crowd. Firing her isn't enough. Lawsuits aren't enough. What needs to change is hearts, policies, culture. My son can't do that alone. Marcus stepped forward. Effective immediately, Meridian Airlines is implementing mandatory empathy training for all staff. Not diversity checkboxes. Real, intensive programs about seeing humanity in everyone. Any employee with discrimination complaints will be investigated by an independent board. And we're creating a passenger advocate position on every flight. Someone whose sole job is ensuring dignity for all travelers. Sir, Richard protested, the cost of decency is always less than the price of prejudice, Marcus shot back. We lost 18% of our value today. How much is our soul worth? Sarah raised her hand tentatively. What about those of us who tried to do right but were punished for it? Promoted. Immediately. You'll help design the new training programs. You know what needs to change because you've been fighting it from the inside. The media had pushed closer, cameras rolling, microphones extended. A reporter shouted, Mrs. Matthews, how do you feel about all this? Grace straightened her shoulders. I feel sad. Sad that it took my son owning an airline for my dignity to matter. Sad that Victoria here will lose her livelihood for doing what she was tacitly encouraged to do. Sad that tomorrow, on another airline, another person who looks like me will face the same treatment. She moved toward the door, Marcus at her side. But I also feel hope. Because change doesn't come from comfort. It comes from discomfort. From being forced to see what we've ignored. Today, millions of people saw what happens when we forget each other's humanity. Maybe some of them will remember next time they witness injustice. Maybe they'll speak up instead of looking away. As they reached the door, Grace turned back one final time. The entire plane was on its feet, not applauding this time, but bearing witness. Victoria stood broken but perhaps for the first time truly seeing. Brad looked shattered but thoughtful. Sarah stood taller, empowered. The other passengers faced their own reflections in this moment of reckoning. Every flight, Grace said, her voice carrying the weight of all her years, is a chance to lift each other up or tear each other down. Choose wisely. She walked off the plane into the chaos of cameras and questions, but she moved through it like a queen, not because her son owned the airline, but because she owned herself. Marcus fielded the immediate legal and corporate fires while Grace was escorted to a quiet lounge to rest. An hour later, as the furor continued outside, mother and son sat together in silence. You know this changes everything, Grace finally said. You can't hide anymore. The world knows who you are. I know. Marcus managed a tired smile. No more pretending to be middle management. That's not what I mean. Grace took his hand. You have power now. Real power. The question is, what will you do with it? Marcus thought of all the buried complaints, all the silent victims, all the Victoria Chens who'd been taught that some people mattered less than others. Change things. Really change them. Not just at Meridian but industry-wide. We'll set a standard others have to match. It won't be easy. People resist change. Then we'll persist until they can't. Grace squeezed his hand. That's my boy. Now, can we please go to your house? My hip is killing me, and I haven't seen my grandbabies in months. Marcus laughed. The first genuine laugh since boarding. Of course, Mama. But first. He pulled out his phone. Sarah. Yes, it's Marcus. How would you like to be Meridian's first Chief Dignity Officer? Yes, I'm serious. Yes, that's a real title I just made up. Your first job is making sure no one ever feels like my mother did today. As he spoke, Grace looked out at the San Francisco skyline. Somewhere out there, people were watching the video, reading the story, choosing sides. Some would dismiss it as one bad apple. Others would recognize the pattern, the system, the culture that created Victoria Chens and enabled them. But a few, maybe more than a few, would remember next time they saw injustice, would speak up, would refuse to be complicit in cruelty. And that, Grace thought, was how the world changed. Not all at once, but one flight, one stand, one act of courage at a time. Ready to go home, Mama? Marcus asked, ending his call. I've been ready since I sat down in 2A, Grace said with a wry smile. It just took a while to get there. They left together, walking past the remnants of corporate chaos, past the media still hungry for soundbites, past Victoria Chen being escorted out by security, her career in aviation over but perhaps her education in humanity just beginning. Tomorrow, Meridian Airlines would be different. Not perfect. Perfection was a journey, not a destination, but committed to the radical idea that every passenger deserved dignity. It would cost millions in training, restructuring, and lost revenue from those who preferred their prejudices to progress. But as Grace Matthews had taught her son long ago, and as he'd remembered today, doing right was always worth more than being rich. The automatic doors closed behind them, shutting out the noise and fury. Ahead lay the quiet promise of family, the healing power of love, and the satisfaction of knowing that sometimes, just sometimes, justice didn't just prevail, it soared. This story reminds us that dignity is not negotiable and courage can come from unexpected places. If you've witnessed or experienced discrimination, remember, your voice matters. Share your thoughts below, and let's continue this conversation about building a world where everyone is treated with the respect they deserve. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as interesting and